Yeah.
So
And I think that's
not to
why
defend,
it's Mhm.
Hitler, but we don't do that. We're not going to
Don't
make a
worry,
habit.
Anthony. This is a safe space.
Good, yeah, safe space.
If you have to go full Kanye,
Yeah, I know. I'm going to come out. Yeah, that's great.
America Today reminds me a lot, and this is why these movies are so good. It reminds me a lot of like the Galactic Republic in the prequels,
I
the
knew you
Star
were
Wars
going to say
prequels.
that.
Kills
What's the
democracy.
line that this is how democracy ends? With thunderous applause, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Elephant. My name's Julian, and I'm joined by my co-host, Anthony. Hi,
Hello,
Anthony.
everybody. Hello.
Today, we're going to be talking about authoritarianism and if it's an appropriate way to start talking about our country in the near to present time.
Yeah.
How's your week been, Anthony?
It's been, yeah, we haven't recorded in a while because we were very busy last week. But today I was on the road today. Part of my job takes me on the road and Stockton, and then I went to Turlock. I am not from these places, but I visited those places. And on my way, and I bring this up because California is a varied place. It's a big, big place filled with many different types of people. As I was on the 99 going south, I see a van, and on the back it has a sticker, right? And I see Trump Vance, and then I see the president, with the
The
hand motion,
fist.
the
Uh-huh.
fist, and then it said Trump 2024.
Whoa.
Yes. And then I was like, oh my God, like this is California plates. I drove past this person. I look over, the most normal looking suburban mom, grandma ever, right?
Wow.
And yeah, and it was it was a great surprise, like wake up call to see that, you know, our neighbors, right?
Yeah.
Literally our neighbors, feel
Trump
this way.
forever.
Trump forever, which,
And
yeah, yeah.
much like Batman forever, you kind of just never want to look at it.
No, no, no.
it,
Don't look at it
it
directly in the
goes on.
nipples. Don't do that.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a good observation and
Hmm.
a good reason to talk about today authoritarianism.
Yeah.
And there have been, seems to be kind of the talk of the town these days on asking political scientists and media folks, are we authoritarian? Is this authoritarianism? Like, is our country going to be called the USSA in
Mm.
the near future?
Mm.
And I think it kind of starts off with the deportation,
Mm.
which is probably not the accurate term to use for it,
Right.
but the sending of Kilmar Albrego Garcia
Hmm.
to El Salvadorian prison, which is, I mean, if you look at this prison, it's not just a normal prison. This is
Right.
like where they try to send the worst of the worst. It's designed to be the kind of prison that you send for like a photo up of like, we sent these guys
Yeah.
to a very dark hole.
I
And
think that's a
mhm,
great place to start, though. El Salvador,
mhm,
just in general, right? And
mhm,
they recently elected their own dictator.
mhm.
And the prison is sort of his cornerstone of criminal justice, right? And it's it's interesting. I mean, he did what Trump is doing slower. They have due process in El Salvador,
Mhm.
written into their constitution, but that was completely ripped away. And that prison is a symbol of what happens in a former democracy that sort of, right, like the reason he was so popular was because he said he was going to fix the gang problem, right? and
Yeah.
people are so desperate for it. And I have a particular inside sort of view on it because my clients were the people coming from places like El Salvador, and
Mhm.
were telling me the stories of gang violence, right?
Right. Right.
And it boils down to the the police were corrupt, right? The police, served the strongest person in the area, which many times was the gang, right?
Yeah.
And so there are no laws. It's just whims, the whims of the warlord, right? And so you have somebody running against that, and there is no time for niceties, right? There is no time for deportations. I mean, for due process and juries and trials, right? It's
Hmm.
just, put them away. And it worked for him. He won election, and he's actually pretty popular.
Hmm.
And,
Yeah.
it's Hitler was popular too, right? Like,
Yeah.
these are
A lot of
popular.
them are.
A lot. They're popular, charismatic people, men usually. Well, no, there's some women actually, but that meet a desperate sort of nation, right? And so the
Hmm.
nation, at least in Germany, very desperate, war torn by World War I, right? Very poor. El Salvador, very poor country, war torn by gang violence, right? And so there's this chaos, and then this one strong man comes and is going to fix it all. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, El Salvador is a very different country than the United States, even if we can see some similarities. And I feel like I've been hearing people bandy around the term authoritarian a lot recently when referencing Trump, when referencing the actions that he's taken, especially with regards to Kilmar Abreu Garcia, where he didn't go through due process to send him to El Salvador. But I want to kind of start a lot of our conversation today with a breakdown of like what is authoritarianism. Definitions are sort of very ivory tower ways to start discussions, but I think that it's important because I think that a lot of times people use terms like authoritarian or autocrat or dictatorship, and they all kind of mean the same thing, I think, to the layperson, and people don't really know what does it mean to be authoritarian, what does it mean to be an autocrat. These are things that like very educated people like to say, and they think that they've done their job when they're like, I did it, I classified Trump as an
Right.
authoritarian because I looked at the textbook and I crossed off all the boxes. And guess what? Like 85% of them match the description of what he's doing. So therefore, he's an authoritarian. Congratulations. I did my job.
Right.
And really, people are like, okay, so you called him authoritarian. Like, so what? What does that mean? Like, what does that mean to me? How does that make my life worse if
Right.
some Harvard professor describes the president as authoritarian? Uh, and so I kind of think that to the layperson, authoritarian, autocrat, dictator kind of all fit in this bucket of like Nazi esque. Like people don't really know what the terms mean. And I speak for myself as well. Like, I hear the term and I'm like, yeah, actually, how does an authoritarian differ from an autocrat? What is it? What are the difference between those two terms? And I sort of think we we get caught up in the term without me, actually describing to people on a more basic level. Okay, so they're authoritarian. Like, how does that make my life worse?
Right.
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 So, if you're going to like a textbook definition, I would say that as someone who's studied political science, that my understanding and the definitions that I've heard is that authoritarianism is kind of on the scale of like democracy to authoritarian, right? If democracy is like rule by the many, authoritarian is like rule by the few to like the one, right? And so really we're on this sliding scale of democracy and authoritarianism. And so like any movement towards authoritarianism means that you're like moving away from democracy, right? Eliminating due process means that less people have input into the process of whether someone actually did something wrong, right? And a more democratic process means more people get input, more people get their eyes on it, and there's more ways to check and balance the power of the government, the power of a single individual, the power of a business, whatever it is in a democratic society. So essentially, when we're talking about authoritarianism, it means that less democratic power, not just at the governmental level, but a societal level when it comes to justice, when it comes to uh, social nuance. And that's really what we're talking about. And so I think that helps us get slightly away from just being like, oh, he's an authoritarian. They called him. That's basically saying he's a Nazi. And unfortunately, Nazis are like the only group of authoritarians that, American high schoolers get taught about. Like we spend any time
For now.
exploring. It's
Yeah.
yeah, maybe we'll have a better reference point in a couple years. But yeah, I think because American high school really only teaches you about the Nazis as like the quintessential authoritarianisms,
Yeah.
we kind of always end up defaulting to like, okay, so like on a scale of like America to Nazi Germany, like
Well,
what are
yeah,
we
I
talking
think the
about here?
Holocaust also has a little bit to do with that, right? Because
Yeah,
like and World War II, like this is the actions that this particular authoritarian regime took were like very, very like dramatic and obvious
right.
and just like obviously evil, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So if you're in a democracy, of course you want this as your foil, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Although if you've been really critical about it, democracy, like we also, carry out holocausts and we also carry out wars, right?
Yeah, true.
So it's and it's by the many this time.
Yeah, yeah, very true.
Yeah, and so, pointing right back at us, right? Like, we have a genocide going on right now and it's funded by well, a democracy question mark,
Yeah,
and it is our US policy, under Biden and under to support Israel. So yeah,
yeah.
so
And I think that's
not to
why
defend
it's Mhm.
Hitler, but we don't do that. We're not going to
Don't
make a
worry,
habit.
Anthony. This is a safe space.
Good, yeah, safe space.
If you have to go full Kanye,
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna come out. Yeah, this is great. But yeah, so it's not like democracies are like righteous, on the righteous side of the spectrum. It's just exactly what you
right.
said.
Where's the power
Right,
concentrated?
where's the power concentrated? And because we live in a democracy, our bias, I guess, or our mentality is that there's a common sort of good and there's a common sort of voice, right? That is wiser than
Mhm.
just one or a few, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally. I think that, that's super important to point out. I think that one of the problems with sort of having Nazi Germany as our constant foil is that we exist in kind of this binary space between, shining city on a hill
right,
and concentration camps.
right, right.
And the problem is that
Yeah,
authoritarianism
yeah,
does and democracy do exist on this scale. And you can veer into the, negative side, the authoritarianism side, without quite reaching Nazi Germany level.
right,
Right.
right.
And I think that's
Yes,
one of the things that for lay people, it's hard to get their heads around. If you say Trump is like a dictator or he's an authoritarianism, they're like, yeah, but where are the death camps? Like,
right, right,
I don't see death camps.
right.
So I don't think that's a correct assessment.
Hmm. And as much as I want to say, oh, they're coming. Like I don't want to be a fear monger, I don't.
Right, right, right.
Yeah,
But,
yeah,
to the
yeah.
point of, what brings us here today is that there are some things that are happening
Right.
that are, he's sending people to other people's
I
gulags.
know, I know.
And
And
that's very concerning.
look, today, like last week or like 2 days ago, a judge allowed his attorneys to sanction the Trump administration. Right. So I know that's like very small and like a sanction is nothing, basically.
Right. What does that mean for our listeners? What
Yeah,
does
no,
that mean to for a judge to be
it's
able to
just, I
sanction the?
mean, it's sort of inside baseball, and sort of like in legal circles, sanction is like the worst in a courtroom, in a non-criminal courtroom. That's sort of the worst thing that can happen, you know. And so it's the judge saying, yeah, you can start the process of pointing out that what they did was completely out of bounds, right?
Hmm.
Again, you have a sanction, which is, you know, a statement in a courthouse, and then you have someone suffering, right?
Hmm.
And so you see the differential of power. Where is the power, right?
Right.
And in immigration, the power is completely in the executive branch. Even the courts, immigration courts are executive branch courts. They are under the Department of Justice, right? They are not
Hmm.
independent judiciaries, right? They don't belong to the judicial branch, which is a little bit confusing, right? Because they're courts and it's a judge, but they're administrative courts, they're executive courts. So it's
Right.
very, so like when you said like he's starting his authoritarianism here, well, that's kind of what that's the most logical place to start, right?
Hmm.
Because he controls those courts. Um, but you know, like that's where it starts, right? And he's a legal permanent resident, which means that he has legal protections, right?
Hmm.
Granted, there, you know, he is deportable, right? You know, legal permanent residents are deportable if they commit certain offenses. The you know, the evil thing about this was that his offense was having a tattoo, right? That some people you know interpret as being part of
Well, no, I'm pretty sure
yeah.
that MS-13
Yeah.
is actually tattooed
So I
on
was really
his knuckles.
confused about that. I was really confused about it because I saw that twice, and
Yeah.
he really thinks that those are part of the hand. Like, does he believe that?
Yeah.
Does he
Yeah. It
actually
was.
believe that?
It's quite clear from the conversation he was having that he believed that the
Yeah,
photoshopped images of
is
MS-13
on his
were in
actual
fact
hand. Yeah.
his actual tattoos. Even though if you look at the picture, I mean, it's pretty clearly photoshopped.
Yes.
Like
No, no. I thought everyone understood that.
everyone did but him. Like I think that
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
handed it to him. They're like, "Look at this, Mr. President. This is what the tattoos mean. Look at this interpretation." He's like, "Wow,
Wow. It's
MS-13
actually
means
on there.
MS-13." And they're like, "No, those are just the captions." No, 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 no.
No, no, no.
Sir, this is not the captions.
Oh, he's such an, oh god. And you see, I mean, I mean, at least Hitler wrote a book, you know, like an actual book in jail. Like he did not write. Donald Trump did not write Art of the Deal. Like guys, like you go on Fox News during the tariff meltdown, and it's like he wrote the Art of the Deal. Like we're in great hands. It's like he didn't write it. A ghostwriter did, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least Hitler wrote his own book. So yeah, he's not very bright, and
More defense for Hitler
yeah, that was,
from Anthony's corner.
there was a Sarah Silverman sketch where she comes on Hitler, and Hitler is very offended that they're comparing him to Trump. You know, and it's hilarious if you guys want to look that up, but it's obviously very dark, and it's where we're at today, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, there's the deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. There's also, what is it, four children that are
Yes.
American
Yes.
citizens
Yes.
that were also, I hate using the term
Well,
deported because they're not,
no, they can't be deported. It's impossible.
yeah,
They were just kidnapped.
yeah.
Yeah.
And one of them has
You know what they were?
cancer.
You know what they were actually? It's not even a legal term, but they were exiled. That's really
Right.
what it is, right? Because
Mhm.
this is literally, it's not like, you know, this is their country that they were born in, but they can't live here anymore, you know? Yeah, because of who their parents are. So, like, yeah, we're getting into some medieval sort of stuff here.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite crazy to me anytime, like how many times is the Trump administration's going to like send children
Right.
into the worst possible situations,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like when you're deporting American citizens who are children with cancer
Right.
to Mexico. Like, what is happening here? And so I think for those reasons, people are like, yeah, this is definitely becoming more authoritarian. What do you think about Trump going after these law firms that are, I don't know, he finds might oppose him? He wants to basically extract fealty from.
Right. I mean, it worked, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think he understands, and while he didn't write the art of the deal, he does understand that any sort of type of power and any sort of negotiation, it's all about people, right? And people can be messed with, right? And people can be threatened, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can use your power, to frighten and to intimidate, right? And I think he does know that everyone has their breaking point, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and and so yeah, I do think that he felt very threatened, right, the first time around. He got impeached twice, right, and he is the first time around he sort of learned the limits of his power, right? He learned the limits of how the court can stop him. He learned the limits of how Congress can stop him, right? And I think this time around he's going out of his way to make sure his plans are court proof, either because he installed the judges the first time around, and how nobody's going to dare legally oppose him, because then he'll go after their livelihoods.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is quite a turnaround from a candidate who was being photographed in Atlanta and who could get no lawyers to represent him, right? Because he wouldn't pay them.
Yeah.
And now look at him now; he's shaking down huge law firms. Um,
Yeah, it's
it's,
crazy.
it's an insane turnaround for him. Yeah.
Yeah, I think going after the law firms, going after universities,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to extract fealty from them. The problem with authoritarianism over democracy is that it creates this vicious cycle
Yeah.
that sort of accelerates itself, right? The more power that you accrue, the more you exert it over other people. And then as you exert that power, the calculation stops becoming how can we do the best policy work for the people of the country in order to get reelected? How can we enact the best policies, pass the best laws to get reelected? And more so, how can I convince people to be so afraid of me that they won't oppose me?
Right.
And if I can convince them to do that, then I'll have these soaring high approval ratings from all these people that are just afraid, and that approval will just enable me to keep going and do it all over again, right? And when the calculation as a citizen of your mind is, in my work in working in politics, there's a lot of consternation about this, because if you think that you're going to lose a grant for millions of dollars for your organization
Right.
because you insulted the president publicly and openly, then you're not going to optimize to then do good work. You're going to optimize to please the president,
Mm.
right? And that's a very dangerous game, because it gets us from trying to extract results and productivity out of the nation, and gets us to the state where it's just about pleasing one person
Yeah.
in order to enrich yourself,
Right.
because all
Yeah.
blessings
Well,
flow from
because
him.
we stepped away from the common, the common good, the common wisdom, and the common voice, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
democracy, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so you're right. I think we all tend to have it within us, all human beings, not just Americans, but all human beings have it within us to follow the strong leader, right? And I think it
Mm-hmm.
comes back from tribal times,
Mm-hmm.
follow
Mm-hmm.
the person that will protect you, that will give you the most, bare meat at the end of the day, right? Um, Democracy requires moving from that mindset to, now we live in a society, and we all sort of get to decide when we hunt the bears, you know. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's much better for all of us to get to take turns at our resources as opposed to just a few of us, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, because that will enable us to have, you know, other things besides just bear meat to eat, you know.
Right.
And what do you think about this idea that Americans, you know, we're rebels, right? We don't really respond to, you know, an authoritarian. Well, we didn't for a long
Yeah.
time.
Mm-hmm.
Has our DNA changed, right? When did that start to happen? Or is this there's still sort of a hope that there'll be a backlash to this?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I fundamentally don't believe that people like to vote away their own rights,
Hmm.
right? And I think that the easy cop out is to say that they don't know what they're voting for.
Hmm.
Like they didn't know that Trump was going to be, this authoritarian person. Like, no, they know who, I think he's been on the public scene, in the political scene for over a decade now.
Right.
We know the kind of person that he is and his tendencies. So why did they feel that they needed to risk the possibility of electing an authoritarian leaning leader in order to get X thing?
Hmm.
Because I think it's too easy to say, oh, they didn't know that he would be authoritarian. I'm like, really? So they never watched him speak at all, ever. And it would be like insulting to just say that, oh, well, they actually just want an authoritarian for nothing, right? That they just prefer authoritarian leadership. There are some people in like the Trump sphere, the Trumposphere, that kind of tacitly or like subtly
Well,
advocate for
I mean,
authoritarianism.
yeah,
Like,
Peter Thiel, I think, is on camera
yeah,
saying, right, like the political process is too tedious, right? We need to replace it with,
right.
and, you know, it's so tedious to go back and get everyone's consent and one, you know,
Yeah.
and, you know, he's just saying it out loud. And it's, um, you know, I can understand that. I can understand, not Peter Thiel, but I can understand how a tech executive could think that way, right?
Right, right.
Um,
The
and,
other guy to me is Curtis Yarvin. I don't
mm,
know if you're familiar with him, but he's kind of, his whole philosophy is that, like, well, all the best
mm,
organizations in America are like
right,
corporate businesses,
right,
right? Google's and
exactly.
Facebook's
Right,
and Oracle's, like, they're the ones that make all the money. And every great organization is run by like a CEO that like basically has unilateral power to do almost whatever they want within the organization. So
right,
America should just be like a corporate board office
right,
where there's the CEO calls the shots and then sometimes gets voted out by the board, but really it's mostly an
right,
autocracy
right,
plus some oligarchical
right,
oligarchs. And so there are some people in the Trump sphere that are like, yeah, actually authoritarianism is great,
right.
that's what we should try. But I don't think you know your farmers in Missouri or like coal miner in Appalachia is like, yeah, like democracy is too slow. Like, can you imagine all, like, I sat through this city council meeting and like
Right,
look at how long it took.
right,
Like they're not really that
right.
interested. They don't really care that much about the process.
But freedom, like they care about freedom,
Yeah, and
right?
they like freedom.
Right. And Trump was selling them freedom, right?
Exactly.
Um, yeah,
I think that's the thing, is like, what is Trump selling them? What is this
right.
freedom that Trump is selling them?
Well, I
And
mean, yeah,
I
I
have a
mean, it's like it's a feeling, right? Like the feeling that this is your country again, right?
yes.
That's what he's
Hmm.
selling, right?
Hmm.
And
And I think that
yeah,
ties into some of the racial
right,
aspects and gender aspects and so on that we were talking about in episodes past.
right,
You know, your country feels like it's your country again when
right,
Like, you're not surrounded by all these people that like speak different languages than you
Right.
do. You're like,
Hmm.
oh, finally, yeah, like I have the freedom to go to the grocery store and
Right.
understand what everyone is saying.
Right.
I get that. And uh you know, I think, though, in addition to that, there is a certain frustration in America with why we can't have nice things.
Mm.
Like, I don't know. There's this recent poll that came out on like CNN. I forget who ran the poll. It was basically this thing of, is the government doing too much, or the government isn't doing enough?
Hmm.
Which I think is one of like the worst polls I've ever seen, because I think both of those questions
Yeah.
can mean like totally different things
Totally. Yeah. What are
depending
you?
on how you ask them, right? The government is doing too much.
Hmm.
That's why I can't, that's why it's not doing the things that I want. They're not really mutually exclusive questions. Like, it can be doing too much, and that's why it's not doing enough for me. I think the entire poll is like kind of
Yeah.
bogus. But the
Sure.
like headline was that like more people now think the government isn't doing enough than doing
Interesting.
too much, which is like how the poll was previously
I
tracking.
do remember though when polls came out like that. Oh, like we all sort of dissected it, and how are we going to
Yeah.
change the mandate's
Yeah.
message to fit this poll, because this is, but also like autocrats don't take polls,
Yeah.
uh, but so okay, so that's good to know that people think that the
But
government is not doing enough.
yeah, I
Okay.
do think that there's this brewing sort of conversation in America that Trump sort of takes advantage of, is that like the government doesn't work and I'm going to get it to work,
Mm,
right? And that's
mm,
why I'm going to bring in Doge and I'm going to bring in
mm,
Musk, and he's going to like find out why the government isn't working, and he's going to fire all the people that aren't doing their
mm,
jobs. And even if, you know, more even if the government doesn't get more done by the time, at least they'll cost us less money, and your money will be more efficiently spent, right? And so I do think that there's this sort of myth that goes around on the right that like we are here to fix government because government is totally broken, doesn't work, and we need to get results from you. And I think that resonates with some
mm.
people to a large extent, where they're saying, and I'm somewhat sympathetic to this, they're saying, yeah, you know what? This is the United States of America, is the richest country in the history of the world. And I've lived through a global financial crisis I've lived through a pandemic induced recession
Mm.
in my 30s, and can't, buying a house has been out of my reach for a decade.
Right.
Prices are really high for food and energy and, lots of other things.
Mm.
Like, I look at Europe and I'm like, they have, it's not even really fully partisan too. They
Right.
look at Europe and like, Europe has, you know, like free healthcare. They have government provided healthcare. Japan has high speed rail trains.
Mm.
China has tons of new housing for like billions of people. There are billions of people in China, and they're
And
building
high speed
housing
rail trains.
and high speed rail too, and clean energy.
Yeah.
And
Today, Trump
why?
took about 4 billion out of our high speed rail project in California.
Right.
Yeah, today.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't
Amazing.
getting built anyway, but like, so it's like, oh no, you took away no, but he took away $4 billion out of it today.
Yeah. And so I do think like both on the left and the right, there is this ample appetite for like, why can't we have nice things? We're the
Right.
richest country in the world. And
Yeah.
I
What
look
does that
around the
mean? Like,
world
we
and
don't.
they have better stuff than we do.
Yeah, that's true. Do you think people think that way? Like, do you think Trump people think that way? Hmm.
I think that for many of them, they've gone through these financial hardships. They've seen like, manufacturing jobs leave in the Midwest, and, uh, you know, the like like coal mining jobs leave in Appalachia, and they do feel kind of shafted, and they feel like, America hasn't been working out for them.
Mm.
And make matters worse, they look around and like all of a sudden like people of color are on
Right,
TV and
right,
like
right, right.
they're getting elected. And you're like, things seem to be working out for them. Like,
Mm,
why aren't they
mm,
working out for me? Like,
yeah.
government needs to work for
Hmm,
me.
hmm.
And I think it starts to veer less into like if government works in totality
Yeah.
and for everybody, or whether
But
government
that's
works for just me
not
personally.
government. That's like capitalism, right? Like when we say America's the richest country in the world, that's true, but like on paper, right? Like the majority of Americans, right, are in the working class, and so um yeah, and they're not seeing that. They're not seeing the riches, the spoils, I guess, because it doesn't trickle
Yeah.
down. Like that was a fairy
No,
tale,
it doesn't.
in the 80s. It doesn't trickle down. That's just not how money works. I think government was supposed to be a way to sort of make sure, right, that the money did trickle down, or at least something that
Hmm.
was converted through taxes. That's just basic
Hmm.
governance. We will tax people, and then that money will go to the Commonwealth, right? But that's
Yeah.
not even happening. So these people that are indeed the richest people in the world, they live here, they're paying very, very, very little tax, if at all. You know,
Right.
and so
And so
yeah,
I
yeah.
think I think you really hit upon a good point there, because what we have in this country is a tax system which since the 70s has and 80s has essentially taken from the middle class and the youth to give to the old and the rich,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm.
The
Right,
Republicans' recent
right.
bill,
The big
the
beautiful
big,
bill. Yes.
I know, I'll just call it the BBB
The
because I'm not
BBB.
saying that that's stupid
Yes. Yes. I
nonsense.
love it. The triple B bill. Mm.
But yeah, you have this big bill that they have, and it has directly a transfer of
Yeah.
like 1.1
Totally.
trillion
Totally. And
from
cuts to
Medicare,
heavy cuts to
from
Medicare.
Medicaid
Yeah. Hmm.
to people
Yeah.
earning over $500,000
Right.
per year.
Right.
Like it's a direct wealth transfer from
Hmm.
the poor, the middle and lower class to the upper
Yes.
class. It's crazy. So,
Yes.
and that's been what we've been doing
Right.
for like,
It is. It is.
right?
Yeah.
And that has created a population of disgruntled, disaffected, angry youth
Yeah.
and people in the middle
Yeah.
class,
And then, they're,
which are
yeah.
exactly the type of people
Yeah.
authoritarians thrive
True.
upon to like build their
Hey,
coalitions.
look at
So
that.
they've kind of gotten it.
You just laid out the groundwork, right, of what had to happen, right, for someone like Trump to thrive, right? Like
Mhm.
we didn't have World War I or anything, but yeah, capitalism sort of leveled us, that along with, a 24/7 news cycle and poor education in this country, right?
Right.
And you combine all that, and we're in 1933 Germany,
Yeah.
maybe not that bad, but like our buildings are standing barely in some cities, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, you nailed it on the head. The situation was, I think, more dire than Democrats saw from their vantage point, because Democrats are the elite
Hmm.
as well, right? And I mean, they both parties are parties of the elite, and it's both their jobs to convince, right, the majority. And yeah, I think the Democrats overestimated how much they've helped middle class. They thought they were good because of Obama and Biden,
Hmm.
and no, obviously not. And Trump sounds like he's going to do something, and of course he doesn't. But that's not how you win elections, right? You win elections by sounding like you're going to do things.
Right. And I think that's what he's been, we talked about what he's been selling people on and why people voted for him. And I think they understand, yes, this is some level of authoritarian. They may not think it's as bad as like we can see because we're following things like,
Mm,
these
right.
deportations and this lack of due process and, fighting with the universities and the law
Yeah,
firms.
fighting with the
Lay
press,
people
right?
don't
Yeah,
really
yeah. So
track all of those
if
things.
you go down the amendments, right, our rights, yeah, every single, almost every single one, he's attacked, right? You know, free speech of students, free speech of the press, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, he's not going to attack the Second Amendment because they like that.
Yeah,
They like
except for the
that.
Second Amendment, Anthony,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
most
no,
important amendment.
that's yeah. And I'm sure he's going to quarter people soon, you know, in your house. Which, as you know, a gay man, I would not mind. But if they're cute, they could stay. Support the troops, Julian. You have to support the troops. I'm a pacifist, but I support the troops. Uh, I just anyway.
I don't even have a witty comeback for
Thank you.
that one.
Just
That's
it's Pride Month. Let me have that one.
good.
But yeah, and due process is a big one, right? Due process is huge, and
Yeah, without due
you know,
process, you really don't have any
right?
other rights,
Exactly,
right? Like
exactly,
you kind of get rid of
right,
that one, and
exactly.
you're kind of
And
fully
yeah,
everything's
habeas corpus is a big
cooked.
one. Habeas corpus is
Yeah.
huge, you know,
Hmm.
and putting people in gulag in Central America, that is destroying habeas corpus, right?
Right.
And this does sound alarmist, but I think it's going to come true. Like if they can do it to him, if they can do it to Garcia,
Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Mm.
they can do it to you, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, and I think it's gonna get worse. We're gonna see it get worse, and I mean, they just did it to U.S. citizens. Yes, granted, they were children, but they were still U.S. citizens, right? Yeah, I mean, the court is. I mean, we're about to see if the Supreme Court is about to announce their new rulings in a couple of weeks, and so we'll see for the first time, sort of how they feel about certain issues. But yeah, it's not. It doesn't look good. And in that spectrum that you were, there are a lot of ways that he does not. He's never liked democracy. I think at one point he said, and this is just like trials. We're supposed to do five. Like that's too many trials, you know. Like yeah, and it's like yeah, that's the whole point of law and order. And so yeah, there is a breakdown in that, and I wonder when there's going to be a pushback. Right? You see it
Yeah.
in these town halls, you know, in Iowa, and bring him back. Right? That this they're trying to because people know that that's unfair. I think people do see that that's unfair, and it's going to be very interesting seeing as he gets more, nakedly authoritarian, how America responds if we do, you know.
Yeah. Agreed. So, what do you think we do as normal citizens, as people that are reading these headlines and very concerned, like, hearing that your country is making a turn towards authoritarianism is it seems like bigger than like one
Yeah,
person can
I mean,
solve.
I hear people from Russia, from Ukraine, you know, like wake up right now, right? Because it's
Mm,
going to be harder to push
mm,
back later, right?
yeah,
And so maybe we're past the point of return. Maybe we are. I don't know. But now is the time, right? And,
hmm,
just know that this is not normal. This is not legal. And this can't happen without you consenting because we still live in a democracy for now. And,
hmm.
and we can still make our voice heard. And so go to that protest, smash that federal. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Yeah, we haven't talked about January 6th either, you know,
uh,
and that sort of was. I mean, that is him flexing his authoritarian muscle, right? And the big lie is, the seeds of this desire, I think, to be authoritarian, right? Because he saw, oh my God, I can actually lose the ballot box. I don't want to do that. And
yeah,
and And so I do think he's afraid of democracy. He's afraid of you. He's more afraid of you than you are of him, maybe. And that might actually be
Mhm.
true, right? Because look how
Yeah.
hard he's working to take away your right to vote, to take away your rights, you know? And I don't think we live in a country that will just, roll over. I actually don't think that. I don't think that's the America I signed up for, and I don't think it's the
Mhm.
America you signed up for either. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
and I don't think that's the America we live, but I do think we have to get very interested figuring out why people will say, and people say this around all around the world, and I think it's important for us to tell our friends and neighbors that like people choose authoritarianism over bad governance all the time,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
You mentioned El Salvador in the beginning. They said, listen, we know he's authoritarian, but we are dealing with gang violence,
right,
and that's what we're
yeah,
going to that
yeah,
way against the fact that uh, president is a
yeah.
dictator
No,
or
and he
what
said,
have
and
you, right? And
we can't get to the store safely, right? And in
right,
America, we can get to the store safely, but when we're there, we can't afford certain things. And
exactly,
it
exactly.
has the same sort of
Mm-hmm,
psychological sort of affront, right, to your dignity and to your sense of place and your sense of safety, right? And so
mm-hmm.
I think you did a very good job of saying how we got to this ravaged, tired economic sort of electorate, right? And they're
For the
just as
middle
desperate.
class, not
Yeah,
for the rich.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and how desperate America had to be, especially in 2024. I think.
Yes, yes, agreed. And I think that what we have to believe that people can be sold on a better pitch, and that pitch has to be front and center around the fact that we can make the middle class richer than they can, right? That like Trump, for all of his bluster and everything, he wants to scapegoat immigrants, and he wants to scapegoat women or LGBTQ people, whatever it is. He wants to find all these scapegoats because it's very easy to tap into people's tribal understanding of the world to assort blame and to uh, and to name solutions. But those things do not work. They just don't work. And so we have to be wise to the fact that like people do have like real concerns, and yes, they will actively support racism in order to address those concerns. That you can actually show them the light if you're able to put their concerns front and center and make them like sure that they understand that you know what they're going through and what the stakes are. And I don't think that we've had candidates that can really speak to that, right? Like we haven't had a millennial
Right.
president yet,
Mm,
right? We've only had boomers.
mm.
The past,
I think
and I
like,
guess Obama was Gen X,
yeah, I
right?
think three
Obama was Gen
presidents.
X, and then we went back.
Yeah,
We got
did.
and Biden and Trump. So like we went
Yeah,
back to boomers, and then Clinton was a boomer. So like we've had boomers for what my entire life. We've had boomers and one Gen X
yeah,
president, and yeah, he was really cool, and that was nice. But we haven't had a millennial president that's like, what are you guys? Why are you guys talking about like freaking coal mining jobs? Like I'm trying to buy a house. Like, why are you guys talking about freaking like? And I think this is like really bipartisan, right? Like, I think that people on the right and the left are both asking this question: like, where's my president that's going to figure out how I can buy a house? Where's my president that's going to like figure out how to stop corporations from like stealing all of my data and using it
right,
to addict me to their products, right? Like these are modern problems that most people are actually affected by and have been totally unaddressed by either party. And I'm not here to play both sidesism about how
right,
both parties are equally bad. They're not, but we've been ignoring what is probably the like largest demographic of like
right,
millennials
right,
and Gen Zers, and like who is speaking to their issues. Like I have no idea. Like we are transferring wealth from the youth to the old
right,
in massive amounts.
right,
So we're put like, and we're surprised that they're like I want to burn it all down.
Right.
And like I'm not going to think that hard about like which candidate seems most ready to like light this fire.
Right.
Uh
That's right.
so I do think we have to like fix some messaging to like get our policy agenda to like the 21st century, or to meet the needs of like normal people.
Right.
But I do think that we have to be honest that like people are not just choosing authoritarianism for no reason. They're choosing it because they have these concerns that they feel like are totally unaddressed, and they'll go with the angriest sounding person to address it.
Right. Yeah, when you're in a desperate, crouching position, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't feel safe coming out of the cave, you're going to go after the strong guy, right? Or at least the guy that looks strong or sounds strong, right?
And it helps if he looks like you.
Yeah.
That really helps.
Yeah. For the trust part, right? Like, of course he's going to look out for me. He looks like me,
America Today reminds me a lot, and this is why these movies are so good. It reminds me a lot of like the Galactic Republic in the prequels, the Star Wars prequels.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's so good, for those that don't get the reference, go back and watch these movies, because the thing that kills democracy
is this the second time we've talked about Star Wars on this podcast?
It has to be, because I mean, it just needs to be brought up like on a quarterly basis.
Yeah.
But like the thing that kills democracy.
What's the line? This is how democracy ends. With thunderous applause. Right.
Yeah. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And Jar Jar Binks.
No, of course.
Casting the deciding vote.
Of course. Yeah. Yes.
And that's my.
I think Mike Johnson is Jar Jar Binks in this one.
Yeah, probably.
That or JD Vance might be Jar Jar Binks. Yeah, Jar Jar Vance.
What I think is so appropriate in those movies is that democracy dies because they're too bogged down with like there's all these elites in the Senate that are like caught up in the process.
Actually, Andor sort of gives you like a backdoor of like, you sort of see their elite sort of. Have you seen Andor?
I'm halfway through.
Yeah.
Still working.
So you sort of see like how the senators, how they live, right?
Yeah.
And then how how the rebels are living, right? And so how there's this huge disparity.
Huge disparity.
Yeah, and then that sort of leads the empire sort of like move behind the scenes and do the thing,
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And like, the process and like the government that can't deliver results for its people puts itself in danger of becoming authoritarian and like wiping itself out. Like democracy only works if democracy works better than autocracy.
Right.
And if people are sitting around looking at China and being like, they have a dictator, but they got high-speed rail and cheap food and lots of money. That's a dangerous position. We've covered everything from Star Wars to Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the appropriate place to end the podcast for this week.
Exactly.
Thanks, Anthony.
Of course.
As always.
Yes.
And peace.
Stay frosty out there, everyone.
Okay.